Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Bryant Romero and today I'm here to tell you about the Houses of Parliament, specifically the Palace of Westminster and its design. Now before we talk about the current one, we need to talk about the one that came first. The first Palace of Westminster was built by William Rufus in 1087. Now William Rufus was the son of William the Conqueror. And his goal was to build a palace to quote-unquote rival the size and splendor of Westminster Abbey. Sadly, this first palace was never fully constructed, but the major hall depicted in this picture here would later become what is known as the current Westminster Hall. You can see in these pictures here the general progression of the palace throughout the ages as various things are added onto it, such as St. Stephen's Chapel, the Jewel Tower, the Houses of Lords and Commons, and so on and so forth. The fourth picture in the bottom right shows a bit of a discrepancy, seeing as the majority of the palace was damaged by our next topic, the Great Fire of 1834. The Great Fire of 1834 was apparently caused by two underfloor stoves used to burn 2 cartloads of wooden tally sticks at the time, which were the remnants of an obsolete accounting system from 1824. No one quite knows how exactly the fire got as bad as it was, but it did end up completely destroying the Houses of Lords and Commons, with the only surviving structures being the Jewel Tower, Undercroft Chapel, the cloisters and chapter house of St. Stephen's, and Westminster Hall itself. As for the reconstruction that began 3 years later in 1837, a competition was held that year to determine the design of the new Palace of Westminster. This competition was won by Charles Barry's Gothic design. Charles Barry then enlisted the work of Augustus Pugin, a devout Roman Catholic and Gothic fanatic at the time, to help him with the construction of this new palace. Over the years, the two of them worked closely to reconstruct the palace. Several records end up recalling how Barry would actually climb up onto the scaffolding itself and work from up there. The new House of Lords finished construction in 1847, with the new House of Commons following several years later in 1852. Barry ended up being knighted shortly before his death in 1860, which resulted in the palace's construction being finished in the following decade by his son, Edward Barry. Pugin, on the other hand, would become an important figure in the revival of Gothic architecture in England, going on to design several Catholic churches, such as Birmingham Cathedral and St. Oswald's Church in Liverpool. Now, moving ahead to the real meat and potatoes of this, the current Palace of Westminster and its Gothic design. Barry ended up designing the palace in a way that the surviving medieval buildings formed an integral part of the whole construction, which leads into the idea that Gothic design was as much about function as it was style. The most important attribute of the Gothic style is the pointed arch depicted in these two pictures here, which was likely borrowed from Islamic architecture which would have been in Spain at the time it was constructed. The pointed arch is designed to relieve stress on other architectural elements, which allows for support columns to be more slender. As depicted in the bottom picture here, you can see that the pillars are a lot more slender, even if there are more of them in one location, as opposed to the very thick Romanesque design with the ribbings across the entire body. The more slender columns allowed for larger windows, also seen in the bottom, as you can see over most of it, which in turn meant more light getting in and more space to add ornamentation like tracery. All these new architectural and design understandings allowed for more of this ornamentation, like tracery, which, as depicted in the top picture here on the middle arch and the top arch, is the ornate stonework that holds these windows up. So again, the top picture on the art, that's all tracery, but you can see it's not across every bit. You can also see that the windows do in fact let in a lot more light than a standard window would at the time. The palace itself has actually had a tremendous effect on the people around it and has influenced the design of some of the surrounding buildings, which is why in some of the previous pictures you can see how the palace and the houses in general seem like they actually fit in the area that they were constructed in, because all the buildings around it were constructed in a similar style to the Houses of Parliament, which could be seen as Pugin's influence over the years. But regardless, the influence that the palace has had on the surrounding architecture is undeniable, and it also helps contribute to the revival of Gothic architecture, as Pugin would go on to do. As for me, that looks like that will be the end of it for me. So I really do thank you for listening. And I understand I have not been the most informative, but well, we can't all know everything, so get out there, do a bit of your own research if you want to learn more about it. Thank you, and again, thanks for listening. Goodbye.